We are Hope Sheds Light. It's a nonprofit that's dedicated to raising awareness about the disease of addiction, providing education and resources to support a healthy community. So we're helping individuals. Our focus is families, and that's why you're here. Hope Sheds Light, what, 3.5 years old now, I guess. It started after Ron lost his son Mark to a heroin overdose. I lost my son Mark about a month after we started Hope Sheds Light. And Arvo, our other founder, has been affected throughout his family with the disease. So we get it, and we want to help you get it, okay? The focus of tonight, of course, we bring some speakers in every time to talk about a different aspect of addiction treatment recovery. Mark will introduce our special speaker tonight, and then we break out into groups, which is really a favorite part, because we like to share, okay? We'll share with you what works. We have some exciting news. We have hired a new executive director full-time. His name is John Hewlett, and he's here with us tonight.
Stand up, John.
Let me give you a little background about John. He served as a managing partner of In-Depth Solutions, where he dedicated his work and human service expertise to assisting private and public sector corporations achieve their strategic growth, what they wanted, which is really what we need here, right? He's been on, during Chris Christie's first term, he served as the policy advisor for human services, children and families, and executive director of the Governor's Council on Alcoholism and Drug Abuse. So he helped to retool the drug courts as well as leading efforts to combat the state's heroin epidemic. John directed NICAD, which is New Jersey's Public Affairs and Legislative Initiatives, for 16 years. He's had numerous other laws successfully enacted to help with prevention and treatment and recovery here in New Jersey. He's the founding executive director of Signs of Sobriety, a nationally recognized agency that provides addiction services for deaf and hard of hearing individuals. He's a good guy, all right? And we are very impressed, and we're very really blessed to have John. He is he's in recovery himself for 30 years, and I can talk about your daughter. His daughter, God's grace, is also in recovery now. So he comes at it personally, comes at it as a parent. I think he's well suited to be with us and help guide us, right? So that's John. Thank you again. That's the last announcement I have, and I want you all to be a part of this, okay? Hope Sheds Light is blessed to partner with Ocean Mental Health. You know they're on our board, but we're doing a program on Friday, March 24th. It's from 8 to 4, and it's entitled Addiction Treatment and Recovery, a Family First Perspective. That's what we do, okay? So there's professionals that are coming, they get credits, families, and there's a fee, and Hope Sheds Light's going to pay for anybody that wants to attend, okay? We really hope that you're there, because it's going to be in the Presbyterian Church, right in front of our new office. I don't know if you visited our new office, by the way. It is incredibly beautiful, and we're very proud of it. And Anne-Marie, our resident genius on so many levels, is so responsible for all that, and we're very, very grateful to Anne, I have to say. Arvo?
I just wanted to say, now that John is full-time, Hope Sheds Light is open full-time. We are open for business, so you have any families or friends, you want to walk in, you want to talk to somebody, we're there for you. 253 Chestnut Street, second floor, in the House of Hope. What a better place to be.
So again, I'm going to pass around some information about this seminar that we're doing. I only have a few brochures, but please let us know if you want to attend, because we need as many people there to participate in this, okay? And with that, I'll introduce Mark. Mark's an amazing volunteer that we have, Mark Schottinger. I think you all know him. He's on an advisory board, and we're grateful for all of his work, of course, and he's here to introduce our speaker. Thank you, Mark.
My name is Mark. I'm an alcoholic and drug addict, and it's nice to be here. I'm also a family member in Al-Anon now, about 11, 12 years, and everybody's doing pretty good, except for me some days, I think. But I just wanted to double down on what's been said. If you haven't been over that office, it's really gorgeous, and Arvo got all his guys to dedicate their work to put that thing together, materials and everything. So congratulations. All those contractors worked on that. It's a beautiful office, and now we got John there. So progress continues. We're going to have tonight very special guests. Enlightened Solutions, which is one of the best programs in the U.S., and we're lucky to have it right here in New Jersey, is down the road a piece, and they have a lot of different levels of care and do great work. And tonight we're going to hear from the executive director, Rob Snyder, who's been in the field a number of years and is going to talk about the issues with the brain disease, and addiction, so on and so forth. Which actually today most places are telling that to patients. It's actually very helpful for patients and family members in a treatment center to understand how this addiction has affected their brain and their brain functioning and so on and so forth. So rather than just a disease concept, it is a brain disease, and it's helpful to do that. And I also want to shout out Rob's boss here and the founder of Enlightened Solutions, Jennifer Hansen, is back again. So Jennifer's been in recovery a long time and very philanthropic organization, the Hansen Foundation, for many, many years now. And this is some of the latest projects that they're doing. So we're very blessed, and tell your friends. These are top-notch professionals, and what I like about them, I don't like just getting folks that go on circuit tours. These guys are in the trenches every day, helping people get better, helping families get better. So it's not just out of a book; it's from the real deal. So with that, I'll give you Rob Snyder.
Can you guys hear me? Yep. All right. Hi, I'm Rob. I want to thank Hope Sheds Light for having us out. Mark, thank you. I'm very nervous, so of course I shoot up a little prayer, and God sticks me to church. This is great. I'm somebody in long-term recovery, and I'm also a family member. I recently, my sister-in-law, I took her daughter in. She's struggling with addiction, and so I'm somebody who, a little brief background on me, where I came from, 13 and a half years clean. I was homeless in Kensington for many years, and in this recovery process, I've had the privilege and opportunity of being surrounded by really good people and really good mentors. I went back to school. I got a master's degree. I'm licensed. Started a treatment center with Jen. And I also teach at ACCC addictions courses for aspiring clinicians. So I love what I do, and I'm going to try to do this without cursing. So if I do, it just slips sometimes. I'm going to really try. And it's been a progress here, okay? And so really what I'm going over here is, I would say, okay, I'm definitely an expert in addiction. I'm not an expert in the brain. So is anybody in this room an expert in the brain? Good. I'm going to sound great. So let's get that out of the way. We don't need doctors in here. But I'm going to focus on a certain area of the brain and how the brain communicates, and I'm going to show you some videos. So you might want to move up if you're in the back. It's up to you, just a suggestion. And I usually stop the videos and go over it. It's going to take about 40 minutes, okay? But this is something that I could do over a 16-week course, and then I condensed it to do with the clients that we serve, roughly 3 hours, a couple times a week, to go over the whole thing while they're there. We usually get people about 30 days, and we'll do it once a week. And the idea is, I like what Mark was saying, this is a chronic relapsing brain disorder. So a lot of times I don't like to just say to somebody like, well, you're an alcoholic, you're an addict. I like to do this and talk about what happens when you introduce alcohol and drugs into your system. And it really deflates the ego. And in fact, that was the approach that Bill used with Dr. Bob when they finally got together. It was about a different approach and very ego deflating. So I'm going to start, and I'm basically winging this because to condense this course all the way down into like 30 minutes, that's what's creating all the anxiety. So I'm going to give it the best that I got. All right? So we're going to start off with a video, the medical aspects of chemical dependency. And I'm going to move into another short video, the maladaptive brain, the pathology of addiction. And if I have time, I'm going to slide over into operant conditioning and classical conditioning with a couple little video skits. I use videos because everybody learns differently. So like classical conditioning, I could go over and bore you with what that really is, or I could just show you a minute video and you'll pick it up like in a minute. So I'm going to just get started.
I'm an addict. Drugs and alcohol nearly destroyed my life.
One of the things I've learned is that during my addiction, I actually altered my brain chemistry.
Addiction is a cycle. My brain became dependent on the very chemicals which were destroying.
Experts aren't sure why some people become addicts and others don't. They are discovering the ways in which drugs and alcohol affect our brain. The National Institute on Drug Abuse has called drug addiction a brain disease.
Diseases have a biological basis.
They have identifiable signs and symptoms and a predictable course and outcome.
Diseases are not a matter of free will. There is no choice involved.
Chemical dependency is recognized as a disease by the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association, and the World Health Organization.
In this video, we want to share with you some of the facts about chemical dependency.
Specifically, the way drugs and alcohol affect our brain chemistry, interfering with its normal function.
Everything we'll talk about in this program relates to the brain.
The nervous system is the body's main communication system, and the brain is the most centralized part of it and the part that controls all the rest. Our perceptions, our attention, it controls memory, movement, and it also controls pleasure and pain.
Alcohol and other mood-altering drugs affect each function of the brain by interfering with the way it transmits and processes information. For example, if I prick my finger, I feel the pain instantly. So it seems. But what actually happens is that the nerve cells at the tip of my finger send a message of the sensation up to my brain. I don't actually feel the sensation of pain until the message has reached my brain.
Messages like these travel along pathways made up of individual nerve cells called neurons. These cells are not connected, but separated by small gaps called synapses. The neurons talk to each other by releasing certain chemicals that act.
Okay, this is important because this is where a lot of things are going to take place in the synapse, all right? Like I said, I'm going to pause this and stop, and this is where your brain communicates. It sends a message, it receives a message, okay? This is the part that science can't really explain, too. And this is what lights up your brain, and, you know, for me, I'm like, oh, maybe that's your spirit. I don't know, so, good.
Like messengers traveling across the synapse.
These chemical messengers are called neurotransmitters, and each one has a distinct structure and message. When a neurotransmitter is released from a neuron, it attaches to a neighboring neuron at its receptor site. A neuron can only receive a neurotransmitter if its shape matches with the receptor site.
Okay, so this is important because I'm going to give you a couple of examples. When we do alcohol or drugs, it penetrates the blood barrier of the brain, okay, and it goes right to the synapse. I mean, it directly right into the synapse. A receptor site can only receive a message that it's fit to receive. So it's like a lock and a key, okay? This has to fit exactly, this key has to fit exactly in that lock. What happens when you do alcohol and drugs is it actually mimics the neurotransmitter. It clones it. It looks like it, but it's not quite it. And it intensifies and changes the message. Okay, so you're talking about like dopamine, for example. The most dopamine I'm going to release is through, anybody guess? Yep. Okay, dopamine. So it's, I like this. I want to do this again. And it's not a bad thing. I mean, you do these things, it's part of survival. But when I introduce cocaine into my system, it's going to amplify that message by 10 times the amount. Okay? And it's going to start to change the way that your brain communicates. So your brain is always looking for homeostasis, steady state equilibrium. Okay? So I do this once or twice, not a big deal. Okay? I do this every day. What's going to start to happen is these receptor sites are going to start to increase. So right now you see 4 receptor sites. Now there's going to be millions of them, but let's just say you see 4 right now. And you're receiving 4 messages and you're sending 4 messages, okay? Now, when I introduce something like opiates or alcohol into my system, what will happen after a while is my brain will stop making it. So endorphins are your body's natural opiates, okay? Endorphins help me so that I don't feel knee pain, back pain, joint aches all the time, all right? So my brain's looking for equilibrium because there's this anticipatory response that I'm going to be introducing a chemical into the system, equilibrium. So it stops producing and it starts opening up more receptor sites. Now, really quickly, to explain what withdrawal is, basically what happens is when somebody stops using, it takes your brain 72 hours to start opening up new sites, okay? Because your brain's trying to find balance again. And then you have all these receptor sites screaming for the endorphin. And you're feeling everything. And anybody who's used a substance in here, like opiates or alcohol, and has become dependent, they know exactly what I'm talking about right now. This is what goes on. All right? So when you're looking at your sister, your brother, your son, your mother, your father, and you're like, I don't know why they keep doing this, Like, you will work really hard to feel good. Most people will do that, okay? But you will work a lot harder to avoid feeling bad. And so this is what happens in addiction. You're going to start feeling really bad. Your brain is screaming. Your receptor sites are screaming for this neurotransmitter. You're feeling every ache and pain. And because it's a chronic, progressive, fatal disease, it's constantly growing. Even your withdrawal symptoms get worse. So the first time you withdraw, maybe you get sweats, you're sneezing, little aches and pains. I mean, this gets progressively worse to the point where, you can't get out of bed, you're vomiting, you're experiencing diarrhea, and it's just completely intolerable.
Alcohol and other mood-altering drugs disrupt the proper functioning of the brain.
They interfere with these pathways affecting how the brain processes information.
Let's suppose my hand has been shot with Novocaine and is completely numb. I might put my finger but never feel the pain. Novocaine stops the pain message from reaching my brain. That's because Novocaine stops the neurons from sending or receiving the message. Alcohol and other drugs alter the way the messages are sent or received in a similar way.
Every thought, mood, and emotion has a chemical basis. So every time you feel something, you sense something, every emotion that you feel, there's a chemical reaction occurring in the brain. And what alcohol and drugs do is alter this chemical symphony. They may produce a feeling that the individual likes, but there's a substantial price they pay for it as a result of this disruption of the chemical symphony.
One of the mysteries about addiction has been, how can it be that drugs of abuse, which are really different in their actions and their effects, cause this same phenomenon, addiction? And now we find through many, many studies that all drugs of abuse act on a part of the brain called the VTA, or ventral tegmental area. Now the VTA is a part of the brain that contains dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter that's associated with movement, but also with emotional response and pleasure. The VTA is part of what we call the reward pathway. Now when the reward pathway is naturally stimulated, it produces a sense of well-being and pleasure. What drugs and alcohol do is overstimulate the reward pathway. This produces the high, and it also disrupts natural brain functioning, often with damaging results.
Most drugs that people abuse fall into 5 general categories: opioids, sedatives,
Stimulants, psychedelics, cannabinoids.
All of these drugs have several things in common. Their principal action is in the brain. Since they primarily affect the central nervous system, they are referred to as CNS drugs.
They are able to cross the blood-brain barrier that usually protects the brain from foreign substances.
They all act by stimulating, depressing, or imitating neurotransmitters that are native to the brain.
They all create some sort of euphoria and they lower inhibitions. To the user, this tends to be the most attractive quality of psychoactive drugs.
Opioids have 2 main effects. They block pain and they induce pleasure. Codeine, morphine, and opium are all opioids derived from the opium poppy. Other opioids include heroin, methadone, Vicodin, OxyContin, and Demerol.
All opioids act on what we call endorphin receptors.
Endorphins is a collective term for the natural pain-suppressing chemicals that are found in our brains. Opioids have a chemical structure that's similar to endorphins, and as a result, they're able to occupy the same receptor sites. This means that opioids activate our natural pain-reducing system, but they do so much more intensely. The activation of endorphin receptors by opioids results in a stimulation of the reward system, and the combined effect on endorphins and dopamine makes the use of these drugs very pleasurable.
People who become addicted to opioids are subject to the classic symptoms of physical dependence.
Increased tolerance. With continued use, we need more of the drug to achieve the same effect.
And the onset of physical withdrawal when that drug is taken away. There is progressively more acute pain. The symptoms are like a severe case of the flu.
Opioid withdrawal is very uncomfortable, and addicts will go to great lengths to avoid it. This combination of seeking intense pleasure and avoiding intense pain makes letting go of heroin or painkillers very challenging.
All right, so the DSM, which is Diagnostic Statistic Manual, it's a diagnosis for opiate use disorder, which has changed. Cocaine use disorder. It used to be abuse and dependence. Okay, now it's going to disorder with mild, moderate, and severe. And basically they did that for a reason. If you take opiates, and there's a lot that goes into addiction. I'm only focusing on like kind of what happens with the brain and addiction. And that's why I'm going to move a little bit into like the psychology a little, because there are so many different things that take place with addiction. Anybody in this room can start taking opiates and you will become dependent on them. And it doesn't mean you're an addict. So that's why some of the language has changed a little bit. You'll go through withdrawal, you'll develop tolerance. So what they start looking at is, I mean, the president can start taking opiates, and the minute he sneaks past the Secret Service to go cop off the street in Washington, then you start looking at behavior, okay? And the reward pathway is the area of the brain that we're focusing on with addiction, and that's the area that I'm talking about tonight. Central nervous system drugs. And they do studies, and they'll basically say, like Percocet, for instance, it's a safe, we've done 100,000 people, you take 5 milligrams of Percocet 4 times a day, and this appears to be safe use. What happens is, because you develop tolerance, you begin to start overdosing. You're taking more than prescribed. Once you start overdosing, you're now outside the safety of what the studies have shown. Street drugs, you are always overdosing, because there's nobody going, well, if you go to 8th and Market, they're packaging the heroin here nicely, right? They did studies on the population and focus. So you're always overdosing, and you're taking a chance. And basically what happens during an overdose is your lungs stop breathing and your heart stops beating, because there's no communication, So like when I'm talking to the guys that I work with, I'm like, basically your brain gets high and shuts down and forgets to tell your lungs to breathe and your heart to beat. That's it. You have no control over that. So we're starting to open up powerlessness now. So, and I use a lot of these different languages because the way we treat addiction is kind of like a big bullseye board, and we're just throwing everything at it. I'm going to introduce the 12 steps. I'm going to introduce, the medical aspects of chemical dependency. We're going to introduce families. For the clients that we're working with, we're going to try to cover everything to cover something on that board, okay? Because, again, I'm not going to get into everything that goes into addiction. Sometimes it's trauma. It's an event that took place. Sometimes it was, I see a lot of college kids that were Division I football players, and then they got hooked on opiates, So, and they had a host of good friends and a great social circle. So there's a lot of things that go into this, okay? But when we're focusing on long-term use, and what starts to happen is your brain starts to communicate differently. The messages are intensified. So, for instance, if I like lemonade, I feel really good. My brain's like, wow, I like lemonade. I want more of that lemonade. Like dopamine is released. The minute I start doing drugs and alcohol, like introduce cocaine into the system, it is like, woo, I really like this, okay? And now, after long-term use, because changes have been made, When I'm no longer using the cocaine or the drugs or the alcohol, I'm experiencing dysphoria. Okay? So now I'm looking for the euphoric effect, and I'm looking for it quickly, which is the impulsivity. And a lot of times when we're dealing with people that are coming off drugs and alcohol, you see that. You see dysphoria. You see impulsivity. They're looking for gratification through any way they can get it. So you take away the drugs and the alcohol, they're looking for sex, because that's the next best thing, right? And what do we usually tell them? No relationships. So you can't drink, you can't do any drugs, we don't want you hooking up with nobody, you know, and the next thing they're going to go to is usually food. So, so we see these things start to change and take place because the brain is craving. That's what's going on. The brain is maladaptive, okay? So again, I'm gonna go to the next video that I have. This is a long video, so you're gonna have to bear with me because I told you this is usually something that's done over a period of weeks. So, pathologies of addiction. Not that one. That one. Yep. Over here.
So what makes us who we are?
Okay. We're experiencing technical difficulties. Well, luckily I got back up, just in case. Always have plan B when it comes to technology.
So what makes us who we are? Why, though each of us has one heart, two lungs, one nose, two legs, why are all so different from each other? Perhaps it's our chemistry. Perhaps on a scale the human eyes can't see, little molecules exist in various amounts. And these molecules in various amounts are what makes each individual just that, an individual. Many factors make us who we are. Everyone is familiar with the age-old argument of nature versus nurture. Our personalities, are they genetic or manufactured by our environment? It's both. Our genes begin the process by creating the foundation that everything else will build upon. Imagine tractors tilling the soil and preparing it for growth. Next, our personalities shape the land, like growing trees and building houses shape the land. So for the first decade of our lives, our brain is nurtured into a quaint little neighborhood, ready to house our thoughts and grow with the things we learn. But then puberty hits, and our hormones rage like a hurricane. Our brains naturally adapt, however, in some cases, maladapt. So what exactly do we mean by maladapt? Does nature take a wrong turn somewhere? It's not so much that nature goes
bodily needs and
Okay, so motivation and feeling good too. A lot of times we're dealing with people that are coming off of drugs after a long period of use or alcohol. What do they have? Low-level motivation. What are they doing? They're not feeling good. What are they? Cranky. Not very nice to be around, okay? And they're looking for something, right? So, and again, it started out like nature versus nurture. There are some biological components, and this is what I'm trying to tell you. There are so many different areas of addiction, all right, that we can't cover that all tonight, all right? What we can do is point a few things out. And if I do this well, I like to tie everything in. Like another component of what I would have right now is a whiteboard when I start talking about like codependency, which some believe is the root of all addiction. And it really starts to develop in those formative years between 0 and 10. When you move into the years of 11 to 17, these are called your conflict and crisis stages of life. And a lot of times, if you don't have the support to help you when you're going through stress or you're experiencing life problems or your 5 basic needs aren't met, you can spend the rest of your life in conflict and crisis. All right? Now, if you go for a substance when you're a teenager and your brain isn't even fully developed, right, what is your crutch from now on? What's the solution from now on? It's always going to be, I don't feel good, and I know what makes me feel good, right? So like I said to you earlier, you'll work really hard to feel good. That's why a lot of times, I'll ask somebody like, how old's your son? And they're like, or your daughter? I'm like 20 years old. I'm like, how long have they been using? Especially when you're starting to talk about opiates. Give me a little detail of the history, right? Because I want to know where they're coming from. Like a lot of times there's still a gleam in their eyes. They're still very excited about getting high. And it's a very difficult person to work with because there's so much euphoria attached to getting high, okay? Where maybe after a little while, you start to see somebody and that gleam in their eyes is gone. They're completely defeated. They're just like, I can't stop. Okay, good. Now we got a client. We got somebody to work with. So there is a difference. And not that the person who still has the gleam in their eye can't get better. I worked in adolescent care. I worked at a place called Daytop for like 8 years. And I've seen kids come in there, they did not want to be there at all. It's not like they rang the doorbell. And after a while, 8 months into the program, they were like, I love my life right now. And really, it's because your brain takes 8 months to start healing, right? And your liver, your brain, they're healing without your permission. And then you start to develop things like a good, healthy community where people are going, like if I walk up to Jen and I say you did a good job today, that actually releases dopamine. And she's like, oh, it feels good. I like this. Now, when you're coming off drugs, and I'm like, hey, you did a good job today, Jen. She's like, I'm like, oh, So you have to have the right people, too, right? Empathetic, understanding, but yet challenging. And, when you're meeting somebody that's coming off drugs or alcohol, because it's a very vulnerable stage. There's a lot of people that want to get clean and stay clean and get sober, and they just can't for whatever reason, because this is what's going on.
full action. It makes us do things like run and hide if we're scared, skip and jump if we're happy, or make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich if we're hungry. Dopamine also causes us to be alert, like at night, if we hear a noise and are scared.
All right, so I'll share something personal with you here. This is where it gets a little anxious for me. I used to shoot a lot of coke. I hate that drug, by the way. I just shot wheelbarrows full of it. And because what would happen to me is I would go into psychosis, fight or flight. And so I would be below the L in Kensington with sticks, just like this, I can't even move. And before that, when I used to have friends, I would have knives in my bedroom, somebody's coming. I knew it wasn't real. What if, And I always wondered, what the heck is wrong? Because I felt like I controlled everything else: alcohol, heroin, pills, and I very much in control. But this was psychosis, and I didn't find out about that until I got a little bit of an education in school, and I actually had one of my teachers. I would meet him in the parking lot a lot, and get extra after class. I'm very eager to learn, and what's going on, and finding out about the psychosis. So if you were to show up in an emergency room, for instance, they wouldn't know if you're schizophrenic or cocaine-induced psychosis. They just watch you for a few hours. And if it's cocaine-induced psychosis, you'll start to come down. If it's schizophrenia, then they're going to have to medicate. You know what I mean? So I knew I was in psychosis. And at first, my friends would they'd joke. Oh, there goes Schneider. He's blocking the walls with the chairs. And, there's people coming. But eventually, people get tired of that. And this is a very scary thing to go through. And this is loss of control. Why did I continue to crave it? Why did I continue to do it? I hated it. I know that sounds crazy to anybody else. I hated it. It was my least favorite drug to do. I did it every day. So, powerlessness.
So the primal survival mechanisms that keeps us from being preyed upon. Now, low levels of dopamine can also cause us to be moody and irritable. The dopamine is replenished in the brain while we sleep. So when we wake, things always look brighter and more cheerful than they did.
So we're always trying to keep a client one more day. Go sleep on it.
So how does dopamine come into addiction? Because it is the ever-propagating motivator to have us want more and continue wanting more. Sounds addictive, doesn't it? And for someone who is an addict, they continue to want and want. Often the desire becomes so strong it can make them do some drastic things. Why is it, though, that an addict keeps wanting? Why is enough never enough? That's a good question, and brings us to another part of our addiction equation, serotonin. Serotonin's job is to put the brakes on dopamine. It controls the amount of information the brain processes at a given time. It basically tells us when enough is enough. It tells us that we are satiated. Without serotonin to tell us we've had enough to eat, to drink, or spent enough money, the maladaptive brain would continue in its compulsive manner to quench the cravings. The brain is basically in overdrive, and there are no brakes on the car. Serotonin sounds good, where dopamine sounds bad. Such is not the case, however. Without dopamine to remind us that we're hungry, thirsty, or scared, humans would have never made it into existence. Dopamine's purpose is for survival, so craving can be good. The problem happens when our wires get crossed and our maladaptive brains get confused on what to crave. Here is a good example. Take Mr. Blue and Mr. Red. Red has a relatively normal brain terrain with the right levels of serotonin and dopamine. Blue, on the other hand, is an addict. He has a nucleus accumbens hypersensitive to dopamine and low baseline serotonin levels. The two crave an ice-cold beer after work. At this point, both are craving in exactly the same way. The difference we see is after each gets what they want. Blue, with low serotonin, never feels satiated. So even when he has beer after beer, there is not enough serotonin to tell him he has had enough. On the other hand, Red wanted one beer, and one beer was enough. He had enough serotonin to make him feel satiated. The conclusion here, based on neurological and clinical research, is that a brain with a nucleus accumbens hypersensitive to dopamine plus low baseline serotonin levels equals addiction.
Okay. All right, so it's keeping an eye on time. Doing pretty good, I think, because I got 2 more short videos. But so in a nutshell, that's a little bit about what happens to the brain, how the brain becomes maladapted. And for any of you that I'm sure the whole room has experienced this to some degree, whether you're personally experiencing it or you've seen it with a family member, I mean, you just watch and you're like, what in the heck is going on? Right? So that's what's going on. There's a maladaptive brain. Okay, so now you couple that with low levels of self-regulation, impulsivity, constantly wanting to feel good, right? I know for me, it's like, I know my first few years of recovery, it's like, I just always want to be entertained, man. I just, whatever it is, I want it. I just want to feel good, And so learning how to feel uncomfortable, too, is a process. Because we have low thresholds, low tolerant levels, like, for discomfort. The minute I start to feel uncomfortable, I'm just like, well, I gotta go do something. And you can't always feel good. You can't always be in the pursuit of pleasure. Okay? You have to learn how to live life going through all the emotions. So, and again, I could get into a whole other realm of that. But now I'm going to tie this into, once I have somebody who starts to get a little bit of an education on how the brain communicates, I can get even the most resistant, like I'm not alcoholic whatsoever, to then start to open up a little bit and go, I've experienced some of these things. And again, I usually do this for a few more hours. So there's examples given, sometimes personal examples, and then usually the group members will chime in and you start to get identification. And it starts to become a lively group. So every time we do this with clients, they love this. And what this does is that it opens us up to some of our treatment modalities. Like, why do we do what we do? Why do we do things like mindfulness and yoga? You know, we're trying to quiet the brain. We're trying to create new neural pathways and positivity, reducing stress. Right? So how do I reduce stress? I got to get you to stop thinking about the future, which is so damaging and crazy and awful. I mean, if you talk to anybody who's getting clean, I mean, it is just the projection of crap all the time. It's, right here in this moment, everything's okay. In this moment, okay? So mindfulness, it's getting you into the present. And learning like breathing techniques, self-regulation, things like that. So once they buy into this, they start to go, maybe I'm open. Maybe I can start to look at that first step in the 12 steps. Maybe that's what you're talking about when you mean powerless. Because you come up to somebody and you're like, powerless, or I ain't powerless. You know, but what if you are? These things are taking place in the brain without your permission. Your brain's, you know, so your brain is craving without your permission. If you have low-level serotonin levels like it's talking about, you're going to be unsatiated. You're just going to constantly crave. You're constantly craving. And when I'm talking to somebody like that, they're like, I am constantly craving. And again, even though they might stop drinking alcohol or doing drugs, you know, we start to see other behaviors. You know, I've seen people even go with healthy things like exercise, and next thing you know, they're shooting steroids. You know what I mean? So it's like, what in the heck is going on here? Now, as I move a little bit into the psychology part, you know, I'm only going to touch on that briefly, because a lot of times we're going to say, I can't help that person. I'm going to show you that you can. I mean, people treat people the way I like. I'm only going to be treated the way I allow you to treat me. Do you know what I mean? So there's social learning theory. There's operant conditioning. There's classical conditioning. Behavioral therapy, like even the 12 steps to some degree are grounded in behavioral therapy. So I'm going to show you a clip on classical conditioning, and I'm going to show you a clip on operant conditioning. Classical conditioning is Pavlov's theory, and basically what it is that a conditioned, that a neutral stimuli becomes a conditioned response. So basically it's like this water bottle is a neutral stimuli. It doesn't mean anything to you guys. If I put it in my pocket, it's nothing. But if every time I pulled it out, I gave each one of you $20, believe me, you're going to be paying attention. Wait for me to pull this water bottle out. You know what I mean? So every time I pull it out, you get $20. Now this is a conditioned response. And this is what happens in addiction. A lot of times I get a lot of clients that come to the treatment center, they're in treatment for 30 days. We can expose them if we wanted to. If you have good therapists, you know what you're doing, you can do exposure therapy. You can expose them to bottles of vodka. And the first time they say, oh, they're triggered, they're like, what are you doing? You know, by the 6th time you do that, they're like, oh, I'm good. I'm good, man. In this environment you are. You're good in this environment. What happens, though, is maybe you go home and you walk into your house and, you know, the smell of your house. Like for me, I go into Philadelphia and the smell of the L is like, whew, it's just, I'm like 15 years ago. You know what I mean? I get on the L, I'm just like, whoa, this thing just wants to go to Kensington. You know? So I have a conditioned response to that. So I have to be prepared and ready for that. Like part of relapse prevention is, it's not a question of if you're going to experience some of these things, these triggers, it's when. What do you do when you experience this? Because it's going to happen. Because I see that a lot of times too. Like a lot of people come into treatment and they're like, I'm good. And I believe them. They are done. But this, alcohol and drugs, isn't done with them. You know what I mean? So there's still so many things that are going to take place. And then the other thing I'm going to go over, so that's classical conditioning. I'm going to give you an example of that, and then I'm going to go over operative conditional. So can we pull up this? Wait. There is a curse word in here, so I've done really well. There's one curse word in here, okay? So just prepare you for that, please. These are college kids.
This one?
No.
This one.
That one. Does that not work either? All right, good. Brought the jump drive. Yeah. Classical.
Hey, Psych 101 class. I'm David. I'm going to be testing Pavlov's theory of classical conditioning on my roommate Brian. The conditioned stimulus will be the sound effect. And then I'm going to shoot him with this airsoft gun. He will soon learn the relationship between the sound effect and the shot before it gets too hurt. going to be testing Pavlov's theory of classical conditioning on my roommate Brian. The conditioned stimulus will be the sound effect. And then I'm going to shoot him with this airsoft gun. He will soon learn the relationship between the sound effect and the shot before he gets too hurt. Alright guys, looks like Pavlov's theory worked.
Alright, so why is that important? For a number of different reasons. Conditioned response. I mean, some of you, again, footsteps coming down the hallway the first time it happened, no big deal. Now it's happening, it's like, oh my God, you know, my loved one's coming home. What's their condition going to be like? A trigger, you know. So, like again, I used to work at daytop. I'm built low to the ground strictly for speed. So I walk fast. So the clients, they would be like in the family room, would be crazy, you know. They can hear my little footsteps coming down. They're like, Rob's coming. And all of a sudden, it's like, everybody's good. You know, conditioned response. But I have cameras in the building, so they don't. I go back to the office. Anyway, we're all conditioned. We're all conditioned. And that's why it's important to get, like, support, okay? Because you're conditioned to your loved ones, too, if you're a family member. It's overwhelming. It's just so much. And I need to talk to somebody, or I'm going to end up becoming neurotic. You know what I mean? So I'm conditioned to some of these responses as well. Now, if you're somebody who has a family member who's suffering with the disease of addiction and they start to get clean, you're still triggering them, believe it or not. You know, like, I know you're still lying to me. You know, like this person is saying, I'm not lying to you. You know, like, so some things can take place, and that's why it's important to have, like, family involvement, because it's a process for everybody. It's not just the person who's suffering, the whole family's affected by this. You know, so I'm going through it right now. I got years of experience. I'm an expert in addiction. I got a family member, and I'm still like, I don't know. You know what I mean? But I have to be, like, supportive. Like, I want to believe everything that's coming out of your mouth. You know what I mean? So, and for me, that's when I go and I talk to my support for that. And I'm like, how do I deal with this? Okay. So operant conditioning is a little bit different. Operant conditioning is about kind of, it was developed, basically, I will reward behavior that I deem appropriate. And, you know, there's things like punishment, positive stimuluses, removing something that you care about that's negative. Okay, so for instance, you know, my son, he really likes the Xbox. If his behavior has become a problem, I'm going to take away something that's positive to him. Okay? Or he does something that I like. I might say, you know, you've done a really good job this week. You know what I mean? Let's go to Toys R Us. He loves that, right? Because I'm trying to reinforce positive behavior. So when you're with people, too, they're like, I'm powerless over this person. To some degree, you're powerless over some of the choices and decisions that somebody makes. I understand that. But we do influence one another all the time. And that's what this clip is all about. And it's out of the Big Bang Theory. So I don't know if any of you guys have ever watched that, but you're going to see.
Okay, so Kim, the night manager, went on maternity leave, and her husband's name is Sandy, right? So get this. Her replacement is a woman named Sandy, whose husband's name is Kim.
Easily calculable, we begin by identifying symmetry couples to use sex names. We then eliminate those uncalled like a restaurant or again the aged, the imprisoned, and the limbless, for example. Next we look at the sex name.
It's an amazing coincidence. Can we leave it at that?
I'm sorry. Oh, Penny, it's as if the Cheesecake Factory is run by witches.
Sheldon, it's as if you don't think I'll punch you.
Why don't you guys let it go?
Whatever. Are you finished?
Well, thank you. How thoughtful. Would you like a chocolate?
Yeah, sure.
said be nice to Penny. I believe offering chocolate to someone falls within the definition of nice.
It does, but in my experience, you don't.
There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy.
That's you, obnoxious and sober.
Oh, sorry, Sheldon, I was sat in your spot.
Did you? I didn't notice. Have a chocolate.
Thank you.
You're here a lot now.
Am I talking too much? I'm sorry, zip.
Thank you. Chocolate?
Yes, please. Oh. Hey, Kim. Yeah. You know what? Hold on. Let me take this in the hall. You'll never get somebody got to replace you.
Okay. I know what you're doing.
Really?
Yes. You're using chocolates as positive reinforcement for what you consider correct behavior.
Very good. Chocolate?
Shelley, you can't train my girlfriend like a lab rat.
Actually, it turns out I can.
Well, you shouldn't.
There's just no pleasing you, is there, Leonard? You weren't happy with my previous approach to dealing with her, so I decided to employ operant conditioning techniques, building on works of Thorndike and B.F. Skinner. And by this time next week, I believe I can have her jumping out of a pool, balancing a beach ball on her nose.
No, this has to stop now.
I'm not suggesting we really make her jump out of a pool. I thought the bazinga was implied. We're just tweaking her personality. It's sanding off the rough edges, if you will.
No, you're not sanding Penny.
Are you saying that I am forbidden from applying a harmless, scientifically valid protocol that will make our lives better?
Yes, you're forbidden.
Bad, Leonard.
What could she possibly be talking about for so long?
Obviously, waitressing at the Cheesecake Factory is a complex socioeconomic activity that requires a great deal of analysis and planning. Bazinga. You know, using positive reinforcement techniques, I could train that behavior out of her in a week.
No.
Would you let me use negative reinforcement? I can get done before we go to bed.
You're not squirting her in the face with water.
No, of course not. We're talking very mild electric shocks. No tissue damage whatsoever.
Forget it.
Oh, come on. You can't tell me that you're not intrigued about the possibility of building a better girlfriend.
But I'm not. Well, Penny's qualities, both good and bad, are what make her who she is.
You mean like that high-pitched, irritating laugh?
Yes.
You wouldn't prefer a throaty chuckle?
You're not changing how Penny laughs.
No, that would be incongruous. I was going to lower the whole voice to a more pleasing register.
Oh, sorry, guys. That girl is freaky.
Come again?
Freaky.
Freaky?
Yeah, freaky.
Have a chocolate.
Thank you.
I'm going to make some warm milk and then turn in. I trust if you two are planning on engaging in amorous activities, you'll keep the decibel level to a minimum.
Of course.
Thank you.
Unbelievable. I was just thinking we should probably turn into...
Well, my new bed got delivered. If you come over and put it together, you can stay at my place.
Really? It's a lot of work and it's kind of late.
Yeah, but stay there, we won't have to be quiet.
Let's go.
Interesting. Sex works even better than chocolate to modify behavior. I wonder if anyone else has stumbled onto that.
Okay, so obviously one of the negative aspects to this could be like a drug dealer who's preying, on a family member, because obviously that's going to modify and change their behavior. You're dealing with a maladaptive brain. So I talk to family members like this because sometimes I see a lot of people beating themselves up, hey, listen, a lot of people experiment. I'm sure most of you experimented when you were adolescents growing up. But the drugs that are out there now are so potent and so powerful. I mean, they change the brain quickly. And your brain isn't even fully developed until they say 23, 25, the frontal cortex of your brain, which is where decision making takes place, and a few other things that I'm not going to get into. So you're dealing with a complex issue here, all right? And then the more education that there is, the better chance that everybody involved is going to handle things a little bit differently. So I have a son right now, for instance, he's 15 years old. I'll share a little personal something with you. He's going through it with a girl, okay? So I grew up in a little bit of a household where, for me, it was just like a little abusive. Probably minimizing that, but anyway, so my son, he's got his hoodie up now. He wants to block out the world. He doesn't want to talk to me. We're in the car the other day, right? And I see that he's hurting, and I just want to strangle him. You know what I mean? Talk to me. You know what I mean? I can help you. And luckily for me, I got some tools in my tool bag today, where I've been taught to slow down, pause, reevaluate, and come at him differently. And when I did that, he started to talk to me and open up. And I really had to take a look at what was going on with me. I was full of fear. I want to fix something right now. I want to control something right now. This is my son, and I love him, and I don't want to see him hurting. That's a girl. You know what I mean? So you're going through addiction. It is just incredibly painful to be the one who is not struggling with addiction. Okay? And that's why it's so important to understand everything that's going on, so that approaches that can be used are different. Decisions that are made can be helpful to the person that you're trying to get. Like I get people in the treatment, and I told you some of them don't show up necessarily wanting to be there, but I learn everything I can about that person because I got to use the right people for leverage too. I got to call the people that find out what he likes or she likes. You know what I mean? Find out what motivates them. So sometimes I can even use some of this, and I'm like, what's gonna work with this person? Maybe calling Aunt Betsy is the solution. You know what I mean? Because Aunt Betsy is chocolate, right? And that's what I'm going to use. So there is a lot that's going on, and hopefully you got a little something out of this. Like I said, I had a little bit of anxiety because I'm trying to cover so many different things, and I usually have a lot more time to do it, but that's pretty much my presentation.